There we go. It's Friday, isn't it? I just made it to the tavern in time. Okay, I'm late. I'm sorry. Lots of things going on today, and I was running late. We had lots of, we were looking at pictures. I like looking at pictures. I took a lot of pictures this morning for thumbnails, for videos, and I got distracted. Anyway, welcome to the Nutmeg Tavern. This is live. It's Friday. Woohoo! It's almost the weekend. Welcome. Come on in. Take a virtual seat in the tavern. Maybe you can get the guy behind the bar to actually serve you. He's kind of grumpy sometimes. He usually serves himself and then it gets a little better. Welcome, Ryan, behind the bar.
Cheers.
And just like making all that technical stuff happening on the other side of the time vortex, Aaron.
Hello.
Thank you, Aaron, for making all that technical stuff work. Without it, you wouldn't be able to see me. Probably just in some like handwriting, and that's all you would get for a live stream. It would be really boring to watch. So today's topic is one that was brought to mind because of the work I was doing earlier this morning. So not only I got up early and I was taking some thumbnail pictures, and then later on I said, I really want to get back out into the deep dark woods where there's a whole bunch of fallen timber that I want to harvest it and turn it into cool things, right? So it's always fun when I love to see beautiful trees in the forest, and I enjoy them, and then some of them I like, I would not make a something, I can see the inside of that tree, there's a canoe or a cabin or something. And then you have these trees that are fallen on the ground fairly freshly. We've had a whole bunch of dead ashes in this area because of the emerald ash borer. So there are hundreds of giant ash trees on the ground, and it's like harvest them now or else they're just going to be one more rotten log, which a rotten log is a nice thing, but I'd rather it be something cool. So I was out in the woods getting this giant log arranged so I could put it on a trailer and bring it and saw it up. And it made me think about logging and dealing with that kind of situation in the 18th century, in the 19th century, how much, it's logging today is a dangerous thing to do. And logging in the 18th and 19th century was beyond a dangerous thing to do. There is a really interesting little book called The Bark Covered House. We'll probably be working on our own version of it, so it'll be one of those things I'll probably talk about in a couple of months' time. But this one's a old, like 1960s printing. And Nolan writes about his childhood in Michigan in the early 19th century. And his family went to the Dearborn, Michigan area, so right around Detroit. And when they got there in 18, whatever it was, I don't know, 19, 18, 20, somewhere in there, that area was just trees, all trees as far as the eye can see, nothing else, no roads, no nothing, just trees. And he talks about what happens when his family is I think it's just his mother and father and himself. Father immediately commenced to cutting logs for a house. In 1 week he had them ready, and the men came from Dearbornville to help him raise them into the cabin. He then cut black ash trees, peeled off the bark to roof his house, and after having passed 2 weeks under Mr. Pardee's hospitable roof, so they were staying at our neighbors, we moved into a house of our own, had a farm of our own, and owed no one. Father brought his axe from York State. It weighed 7 pounds. He gave me a smaller one. He laid trees left right and left until we could see the sun from 10 o'clock in the morning till 1 or 2 in the afternoon, when it mostly disappeared back of Mr. Pardee's woods. Father found it necessary for him to have a team, so he went to Detroit and bought a pair of oxen, also at the same time a cow. He paid $80 for the oxen and $25 for the cow. Later on, he talks about some of what was going on there. He says, "Now we were on the border of civilization. Our next clearing of any importance was the little ridge. Father commenced around the edge, cutting the brush, and threw them from the ridge all around it to form a brush fence. And then all the trees that would fall into the line of the fence were felled next, and also all that would fall over it. Then those which would reach the fence felled toward it. They trimmed, they cut, they burnt. It was a constant. It was very difficult for them to move from this giant forest of just humongous trees into something just so they could see the sun around their house. And then it was, how do we clear land just so that we can have a little field of corn? And again, you have to cut enough not only for the field, but if your field is small, the sun will never hit it because the trees around it are so huge. And we're probably talking, a short tree here is 60 feet and 80 feet and 100 foot is probably a common tree in this area. So you've got to cut trees way back. And if you've ever done any felling of trees in a forest situation, if they're all 80-foot trees, it can be very difficult to fell a tree because it snags in all the other ones around you.
Yeah.
So you can't get it to fall on the ground. So you can hear him talking about how they would fell them in rows so that they could keep felling. So once you got a line, you knock them into that line, or else they would just all stick into each other. And
remember when we were doing the felling and the debarking all at once, so we would crisscross them when we fell them on purpose to be able to get our tools underneath?
Yeah. Incredible. Let's go to some slides that I've got.
Real quick, what's the name of the book?
The name of the book is called The Bark Covered House, and the author is William Nolan. It was originally published in the late 19th century. There are reprintings that show up, 20th century versions. You can find it on Amazon. Fun little book. This one, the one with this cover, you probably won't find anymore, but really interesting book. I've talked about it in the past. So fun book.
So a lot of people are wondering what you're covering.
So we're talking about logging, dealing with trees, how dangerous it is, how huge and difficult it is to move. The other thing about logging and trees and lumber, today when we want to build a building, any building basically, we usually use a steel structure, or we use something that's like concrete, right? And that is the industrial structural material that we use today. In the 18th century, it was wood. And it's hard for us to even imagine the kind of machines that they would have to build just to deal with these giant pieces of wood. And of course, the machines were built of wood. So let's look at some of the slides. Here's that first. It's like, how do you deal with a giant log? And these guys have this huge piece of machinery, all made of wood. Look at that pulley. It's like the biggest pulley block in the universe, so that they can lift these logs and move them around. And I'm dealing with exactly the same thing. I only have very light duty farm equipment and pickup trucks to move kind of a giant log. How do I do it without smashing myself or my equipment? And they had undoubtedly the same kind of problem. There they are cranking on this winch up there so that they can just lift this log and move it around into position. They have tow bars and they have different sorts of little logs there to roll things onto. And that little structure itself, really interesting, kind of How do we get this man-powered winch up off the ground so it can do things? Love that shot. Go to the next one. How do you haul it around? What's the wagon like? It rides like a log wagon. You might have heard that, right? Well, there is our log wagon. These guys have put this log up on there. Maybe they had to use one of those giant winchy things to get it just up onto the log wagon. And you can see the wheels are interesting here. They're wheels for smaller wagons had a generally a big iron tread on the outside. The tire of the wheel was an iron tire, and it was one big strip of metal, and it welded into a circle. But for these really heavy pieces, they used wheels that had multiple pieces of metal that kind of overlapped. It also gave it grip on the road and made it easier to change pieces of tire. So there's just the construction of the wagon. Of course, I find most things interesting. Anyway, go ahead. Dealing with these log, here's, woodcutters working in the woods are working on a tree here, trying to get different parts of it down. And of course, you're going to harvest different parts and use it for different things. That, the big giant trunk of the tree is going to turn into one kind of lumber, and all this other. Today, if you do lumber, do logging, you cut the top off of the tree and you just basically leave it in the woods. You let it rot and, off you go. In the 18th century, that's not happening, at least anywhere close to civilization. Every piece of that tree gets stripped off, little branches turns into fuel, smaller or big branches might get used as different items. Your hotkey is moving your slides around.
Oh, shoot.
When you're typing there.
Sorry.
Anyway, everything's getting used on that log. Can you?
Can we go back?
Go back one and see. Yeah. Okay. Go forward. Everyone. Now go forward one more. Yeah. There's a different log wagon. These guys have already been hewed out to square beams, and we can see the teamster. Yeah. We can see the horses. We can see, again, these are 3 treaded tires, just huge wheels that have to be made to haul such heavy logs. Today, of course, we have to put them on giant tractor trailer rigs. They're just using some old worn out horses to pull these things around. Go ahead.
Somebody just said, what was the woman in that picture doing?
She's probably just collecting the fuel type firewood. And, it's not rare to see women in working situations in these paintings necessarily. That whole sort of woman's work is in the home thing, that's actually a little bit more 19th century. And you see a lot of women in hard working situations in 18th century working settings. So you can go back. So there you go. Skip one more.
I gotta say real quick, I'm so happy to see all these nutmeg emojis. People are going wild with them right now.
Excellent.
It's good to see you guys.
Yeah. This is just a special log hauler that will kind of pick up the log. It's just like an axle, and a lot of times it'll have a long stick. We can't see it in this shot, but that it picks up the log and then it hauls it. It only picks up like one end of the log. But here we have multiple horses again pulling that. Go ahead, Aaron.
So it's not an axle that's just attached to a log.
Yeah, it is an axle, but there's no wagon, right? You just use it. That axle lifts it up. A little close-up picture of what's going on with this smaller setting, and you see the different tools here. These guys, they're splitting the logs here. So he's got wedges, they've got mauls, so they can break things down. And there's a woman. You can see more easily here. She's collecting firewood. I think she's even bundling it into her apron. So we can see, lots of things being done here with this log. And the men are wearing aprons, and they're even in this hot, hard-working situation, they've got their waistcoats on, they've got their hats on. You know, they're not just bare-chested out there in the woods chopping up things. You know, they're all dressed, which today we was like, no, I'm just going to be working out there in my t-shirt. Go ahead, Aaron. Yeah, this one. This is a 19th century. There's just, late 19th century, 1880s. So the logging basically looks the same, right? And we can kind of get a glimpse of looking 100 years later what logging's like to what logging was like earlier than that. And here in the 1880s, they're still using oxen teams to pull these logs. Of course, look at this ground. This is a staging area where they're moving lots and lots of logs. And they've got these logs in the ground to use as sort of rollers. They're not, they're just dragging them across. They don't roll themselves, but it keeps the log up off the ground and moving along. These pictures of these horse-drawn and oxen-drawn wagons in the 1880s, huge piles of trees on these. So very dangerous. My wife's grandfather died in a logging accident doing exactly that, stacking up these logs real high. A chain broke and all the logs rolled off and crushed him. So logging, not only are you getting crushed by the trees when they fall, you're getting trapped between them. You're working in the river a lot of times. The trees are they're wily and they try to get you sometimes.
Yeah, not to mention you're using axes and saws constantly.
Yeah, lots of sharp
and the
stuff.
livestock too. I mean, if your livestock isn't trained really well for that sort of work, it's dangerous.
Was there that one other? Did you get that one other pic? There you go. How about that one? What do you think about that?
This isn't logging.
Check out those bellows.
Coming.
I like that. Check out the
August.
crank. Check out the crank situation he's using to lift up those bellows.
Yeah.
Okay, this is like inside
Yeah,
baseball.
yeah.
We got bellows.
Tune in Monday.
Yeah, tune in Monday for bellows. Maybe you'll see that picture.
So do you remember that talk that we went to that conference?
Yeah.
And the fellow was talking
Right.
logging.
You got to see it. I wasn't at.
Oh, you weren't there?
No, I
Oh, it was
wasn't.
incredible. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But
Yeah.
he was basically talking about how, I can't remember the name of the tool. Somebody in the chat will if you don't. But it's basically the tool that looks like an axe or a hammer of some sort that you mark the logs with.
Yeah.
Right? And so you shove that into the end and you mark them. And he was talking about logging up in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And basically you just mark them, throw them in the river, let them float, and then they're down the river.
Catch them downstream.
Right,
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
We should try to have him on.
Yes, we should. I really want to. He's kind of a hard guy to get a hold of.
He's crazy.
He is filled with a lot of information, and he's very intense.
Yeah. He's intense, all right. I think that's all I've got.
How did they make 18th century boardwalks?
I mean, they're gonna saw up that lumber and build it like we would probably build a boardwalk today. Now there are some things that are sort of like boardwalks. Even Nolan talks about the corduroy road kind of situation. I'm sure. I remember covering that in fourth grade history class. It was one of those. It was like, hey, let's talk about corduroy roads, where you would take the logs and just lay them, just right beside each other, just whole logs, just throw them down, and it made a very bumpy road, but it would make a road instead of just two mud ruts that would get 2 or 3 feet deep. So yeah.
You'll see that a lot in journals where wilderness roads have that going on.
Right. He talks about that. So that's, kind of a boardwalky situation. How do you make a quick and dirty boardwalk where you're going to have to go over kind of marshy ground? Well, you just cut these trees and lay them right side by side.
I don't know if that concept of the New Jersey boardwalks or whatever in Atlantic City, was that a thing? Like this is a epicenter kind of boardwalk kind of thing?
There are there's sort of promenade things that are in the 18th century going on in England, where you would have these pleasure gardens, which are just like gardens where everybody goes and walks around, and that idea of walking paths and going places and stroll an area to stroll. Yeah, that's going on at least in England, and I'm sure there are certain places like that in North America. And I think that if you go digging in Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, he'll talk about sidewalks.
Okay.
And they're going to be like boardwalks.
That kind of idea.
I think so.
There are a ton of good questions, and I have to get the super chat here in a second. But somebody in the comments asked what sawmill types were in the 18th century.
So sawmills, you've got the manual pit sawing, where you sometimes there's a pit in the ground, or you have these. Imagine a sawhorse that is instead of being 2 feet high, 8 feet high, and made to hold up a 3,000-pound log. Right? You got two of these giant sawhorses. You got the log up there, and two guys with a giant long saw. And one's at the bottom, one's on top of the log, and they're sawing the log, one board at a time.
Yeah, wow.
That's pit sawing. And then later on, sawmills definitely are a thing that are happening. And you would have a sash sawmill, where you would have saw blades like the single saw blade with two handles, or a frame saw blade, but it's got 4 blades in it, and it's moving back and forth by water power, and you shove the tree through it, and it saws the tree slowly together. There's at least one functional sash, water-powered maybe, sawmill still functioning, or was functioning just a few years ago out on the East Coast. Somebody was keeping one of those alive. Boy, that's a lot of work.
Somebody commented that they want the mug that you're using. Is that one that we currently have?
I don't know. Do we have any of the... I'm sure we're sold out.
You guys can look on the website. They might be there.
You might find the matte black version of the Nutmeg Tavern mugs, and the problem is that we order them in batches, and then oops, they get all bought up. But check out say Nutmeg Tavern mug. See what the website has. You got a link?
I'm going right there.
I'm gonna throw this.
There's a viewer who said they found our channel today from the algorithm, and they're like, "What's nutmeg? What is?" I'm doing a little bit of like. Okay, so basically everything we do.
Oh, is this Tommy?
Yeah.
I keep seeing people talking about Tommy. Okay,
it's kind of fun.
Okay.
Welcome, Tommy.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. In fact, let's go ahead and talk about Zach real quick too. Zach Ball, I used your cherry bounce recipe with fresh blackberries.
Oh.
I picked them here at the farm. I made 4 jars, currently fermenting, 7 weeks to go. I'll let you know how it tastes.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah. And then somebody else asked about breeds of horses in the 18th century. I don't think anybody here is a great person to answer that.
We talked about that during the live stream with JH.
Yeah, but I don't think we touched on breeds that much. It's just some. But I bet you there are people in the chat that can help out. So you guys help if you can on breeds of horses, heritage breeds.
Yes.
I'm going to hop over to Super Chat real quick and catch up a little bit. So just a second. Sorry, guys. John, say something.
Yeah, very profound.
All right, I'm there. Good job, John.
Thank you.
Ryan Mercer on Super Chat. Yay. This means is nearly the week's end. That is right. Denise Maloney Pirate on Super Chat. Tomorrow is my birthday and also my dog Jay's birthday. He will be 15. I won't mention how old I will be. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Harshman Hills. Oh, and early with my coin for the bartender.
Oh.
Very appreciated, Harshman Hills. Thank you so much. You got to make money somehow.
I'm not tipping it.
Reagan Carson, how did 18th century persons make tea bricks?
Brick tea is, if it's 18th century, it's 18th century in China. It's not, and they're not being imported into Great Britain or North America as far as I know. Almost all the evidence seems to point to that being a 19th century trade item, and probably mid or later. You can still buy tea bricks today, but the means that it comes over in the 18th century and Boston Tea Party brick or Boston Tea Party tea, that's in wooden crates. They have one at the Boston Tea Party Museum, one crate.
Really?
Yes, it's like the crate, like yay big square. The story of the crate is great too, because the crate it was sort of an agreement within everybody at the Boston Tea Party that they would destroy, and I mean destroy, all the tea so that it wasn't stolen, it was confiscated and gotten rid of, so that nobody was like, oh, I'm making money off of this. So they really didn't have any of these crates. Well, one person had this crate. It was empty as far as I know. They may have emptied it out, but kept the crate, and the crate moved through the family. And so one side of the crate later on, 50 years later, they painted checkerboards on it and they used it. And some at one point they used it as a dollhouse. But finally, but always it's like, yeah, that was a tea crate from the Boston Tea Party. So that all came as loose tea in that time period. And as far as I know, no pressed tea.
Well, somebody asked if they could have, I don't know, something about Tainted Brain. Tainted Brain's funny. Keltoid 5 on Super Chat. At work, so I can't talk.
Aww.
Just wanted to say I made the pickled onions, and they turned out great. Awesome.
Excellent. It is probably a nice, simple, easy one that is, different.
Did you like them? Very well. I know pickling.
It's been a while.
Pickling isn't necessarily your thing, right?
Yeah, vinegar isn't my woohoo.
I remember you liking them.
There you go.
There you go. All right, Headless Horseman. All I want is a Gordon Ramsay Townsend's collaboration with Gordon dressed as a red coat and John as a militia man. How do we make this happen? Let's start that GoFundMe right now. Let's make that happen, because I'm guessing it's
And
going
the
to take.
GoFundMe will just be to get Gordon's phone number.
And then a bunch of people have joined as members today, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lisa Kilmer, another interesting stream. Please remind us of the source of the black and white watercolors. They are great examples of ordinary working people.
The author's name is Pyne, Pyne. This set is from about 1804, 1805. He did a lot of different art about London and buildings, but he also did some of these trades. They're a little harder to find online, these particular images of the trades. There's sets of plates of people who would be like street sellers and other books too. So there's but his name is William, I think it's William Pyne, Pyne.
All right, Aaron Howitt is in the super chat. Are you a historical reenactor?
Yes. How would I explain that?
Do you have a persona?
No.
Well, historically, you are a historical reenactor who doesn't have time to just get out to all these events.
Right.
I'd say probably that right there.
I try to bring that to YouTube, right? So how do I guess I'm the ambassador in this sense of, historical reenacting, and how do we not just interact with history by reading a book, but interact with history by doing those things. That is the essence of reenacting, and I like to do that on all kinds of different levels.
Corduroy roads, how about corduroy pillows? They're making headlines everywhere.
Sounds painful.
Lee Miller sends a peach birdie with fan. Thank you for being a fan and being excited about it. Star Trooper 0728 sends a super chat with no comment. Nicole Bernard, loved the recent Sailor video. More coming?
There's at least
Should be one more.
At least one more.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit
There's
about.
one more.
Yeah,
I can't make two more. There's not enough.
I
wait. Okay, maybe two more. Maybe.
Okay, Noob Thunder, coin for the bartender. That's right. Thank you. The tip jar is getting full. Lance Summers, have you ever brewed 18th century beer for these Friday live streams?
I have actually drank spruce beer and ginger beer, I think.
Yep.
So we've done spruce beer and ginger beer on the channel, but not just beer, right? I kind of wanted them to be a little more exciting than that, so we did some different kinds of things, but it's essentially the same process.
Mark for Messiahs in Seaward Chat. Were mules used in the 18th century? Well, it's tricky, isn't it?
I don't have enough real specific knowledge about that. I mean, I would just first blush say yes, but there's something in the back of my head that's sort of saying, that might not be as early as I think. So I'm going to say yes, probably.
Roland Smoke Barbecue is in Seaward Chat with the peach birdie poultry thing that says goal, and it's going very quickly. Thank you for that. Rua Day, my nieces and I love this channel. The girls want to know why you wear pirate hats. Thank you.
Well,
pirate hats were in quotations.
Yeah, pirate hats, tricorn hats. They would, in the 18th century, they call a hat like this a cocked hat because the sides are pushed up. And it's because that's really the hat. No, they wore other hats, but it's the sort of classic hat for this whole 18th century time period. They were still worn a little bit later, but usually only by old people, that were stuck in their ways.
And John's revolutionary.
And I'm so stuck in my ways, I'm still wearing the hat.
Sue O'Connor in Super Chat, have you tried a live pickle yet? Salt cured, no vinegar.
Well, the pork is like that. We did the salt pork, which is like very similar to that.
Well, live pickle is capitalized, so I'm guessing it's a particular type of maybe pickled cucumber.
Oh,
I'm not sure. Sue, throw that in the chat. We'll look for it. Buff Chip 96. Why is John abbreviated as Jazz?
The abbreviation is not for John. It's actually abbreviation for James, which is my father's name and his father's name and my brother's name. And the traditional 18th century shortening of James is JAS period.
So this is a question in the super chat as well. LGBTQIA plus in the 18th century, question mark.
It certainly isn't something that's talked about a lot. So, I don't know. There's a little bit of that, but it's not something that's in the public and talked about.
Pack the Bagpiper. How much do you pay for the antique bellow? Or how much did you pay for the antique bellows? We love your channel.
The bellows are a kind of a typical. I've seen different ones on eBay, and they're running anywhere from 300 to. There's a really nice set of apparently, although it looks like they've been adapted some, like 1720s bellows that they wanted 1,200 for. The biggest problem is you got to go and get them. If you're local, that's great, but if you need to drive 10 hours, then not so good.
This is from Aaron Howitt again. Is John really your name, or did you pick it for the channel because of the cookbook writer?
Well, that's John. I'm actually John, short for Jonathan, so this is my name.
He's a Jon guy. Weasel Squeezer, nice. Have you ever gotten, how do you pronounce this word? Myristicin poisoning? From all that nutmeg. Myristicin?
No poisoning at all.
No poisoning.
Never.
Man, I wish I knew. I've never seen that word, but thank you. And no. He's got a little, maybe some tainted brain, but I don't know. It's the cause and the cure. You don't.
I've noticed it more recently.
It's a trouble when the cause is the cure.
I don't have a problem.
To Denise Maloney, Pyron, coin for the bartender, and time vortex operator. Now, Denise, let's
Hey.
leave him out of this.
Hey.
I already have
This
it.
is the tip jar is over here. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we're caught up on Super Chat. Thank you guys so much. Let us. Oh, you want to talk, don't you?
Before
Well,
we go
I'll let
further, let me get the new Patreon people. Every week we try to get to the brand new Patreon people. We're over 800 people. It's amazing, all the folks who want to help us make videos, and videos are not easy to make. It turns out. We figured that out over the last 10 years, and we do need help in this way, whether it's Super Chat or Patreon is one of those ways. So brand new people this week: C. Davis, Katie Teets, Nathan Hedrick, Derek Carroll, Zach Crawford, Kristen Highland, Matthew Ferguson, Jacob Arthur, Diane Pritson, Paige Lauren, Margaret Van Meer, Alexander, and Trevor Slocum. All those folks are brand new this week. Thank you, Patreon folks.
Thank you.
I'm really sorry. I stepped off camera to do a sneeze cough, but I think that you still heard it in my microphone. And it made you laugh. Okay, did they do logging during the winter?
I don't have a good answer for that. The winter is really nice for doing some kind of logging because the ground is hard and you can do different things. In the springtime, the ground is soft. You drop a tree, you can't get it out no matter what you do. So winter time is one of those kinds of times when it is easy to get into the woods. Sometimes the leaves are off. It's a little easier to see what you're doing with those trees up there, and you might be able to move those trees on the ground a little easier because the ground is frozen and maybe snow, whatever. There are certain times a year you can't log it unless, I don't know, you're going to burn it right there on the ground, which they were doing some of those things.
Do you have a video on the ink that was used during this time period, how to make it?
You're talking about ink, did
Yes,
you say?
ink.
Yes, ink. The Brian Allison ink video is what you want, and I'm sure Aaron will try to find that and put that in the chat for you.
Aaron's got it. I know he does.
This is a video we did last year.
Yeah, Brian Allison did a whole writing series with us. We
David
talked about
Dinelli comes in on Super Chat. Did the colonies have formal workhouses in the 18th century? What did they do with the destitute otherwise?
We have talked about that
Sure.
too with Maggie and was it Badger or
Yes.
whatever? So we talked about workhouses in a couple of different situations, and different things are happening in the colonies. There's this time period through the 18th century into the 19th century is a time of experimentation about what to do with the poor in your community, the poor that need more assistance than just something very, very simple or whatever the community is doing, sort of naturally. So what is the government going to do about that? And so poor houses are one of those things that they're experimenting with in different places at different times.
I'm sorry. It's time to squeeze these answers a little bit. Can you recommend a source for the period tools you use at the cabin?
Some of the tools you will find on our website. So special axes and
A
hammer and some other tools like that. Some of the tools we make. So we would make tools to look like 18th century or make them in an 18th century manner. And of course, now that we have a blacksmith shop, you'll be seeing more of that.
They don't know that.
Very soon. And some of them are antique tools, and I just go out hunting them on eBay, or there's this really cool website. I think it's Jim Bode, B-O-D-E, tools. Do a Google search for that. That's a cool website.
And somehow in our area, garage sales are awesome for old tools. I don't know if everybody else has that luxury. But
Yeah.
how did they deal with the wildfires and brush fires in the time period?
I haven't read much about that other than run. That's all I've heard.
How were bridges made?
Bridges are, again, I think the first steel structure bridge comes in late in this period in England. All the bridges before that are either stone bridges or they're wooden bridges. So more likely most bridges are just straight up simple wooden bridges. I believe the 1805 or 1804 Eric Sloane book called Diary of an Early American Boy. So that's, it's Eric Sloane did some wonderful work. It's not nearly, it doesn't have a bibliography like you want, right? But there's a great explanation of building a simple wooden bridge in that book. Highly recommended.
In the comment section, somebody says that their mother has a cookbook from the 1860s and included turtle soup.
Yeah.
They're asking if that was common. Turtles were like crazy. Yeah.
Turtle
you'll find
soup.
recipes like crazy.
Yeah, turtle soup recipes and fake turtle soup recipes showing up.
And lots of stuff on how to dress a turtle. And it seems like everybody kind of had their own.
Little knee breeches or what?
How common was wattle fencing in the 18th century? I love your videos. Keep up the great work.
Probably, although you don't, it's a little more tricky to research and really to nail it down. But I think wattle fencing is an obvious thing that's going on, and I don't think it would be very difficult to get it easily documented in, say, Great Britain. As you come here to North America, I don't have those sort of resources at hand. But yeah, I think they'd be really common.
Did batter and baking powder exist in the 1700s?
So, baking powder. That's where I'm going to go because I don't know what they mean exactly by batter. Baking powder, and I'm supposed to be short answered.
Yeah, baking powder did not exist.
Baking powder is something from 1843. Bird comes up with the first baking powder, and those things are happening. If you go to sodium bicarbonate, that's a little bit earlier, 1820s, 1830s. Saleratus, which means salt with air in it, same thing. But that doesn't really get to be a popular item until that early 19th century. So the only thing that's being used there is potassium carbonate, which is a very, very low acting version of that. And even that is only documented to about 1780.
How did they treat wood from rotting in the 18th century?
They kept it dry. That's about all they had.
They chose the right log.
Sometimes you would burn it. You would actually char the log end, right? And you'd char. And as you burn the log end, it would char in the first inch or two, and that would help preserve it. It would take like creosote itself. So there's some methods of protecting a tree like that for posts, but I think most of the time they just sunk those posts and they rotted.
What uses did they have for wood shavings and sawdust back then?
Whoa, you know what wood shavings are, and you generate a lot more wood shavings than you would dust. Today, we use these saw blades, and they make fine little dust. In the 18th century, most of the time, you're doing a lot of that sawing and splitting, and you're making a lot of shavings. And the shavings are just so great to start fires with. It's just not even funny. And they would also use them as packing material. You've seen that Excelsior kind of packing material. They had tons of these wood shavings. They would use it as packing material.
Aaron, did you see Sue's live pickler reply? I did not.
I didn't. The chat's actually pretty wild today. In a good way. There's a lot of people, so if I missed it, sorry, go ahead and read.
Yeah, you can throw it back in there, Sue.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that.
We want to look at that.
Here's another question. How were upper floors on cabins made?
So as you move up the wall, if you're making a two-story, and generally we call, the terminology when you get to that is not cabin. Cabin sort of is one story, that whole thought, maybe with a little bit of a loft. But you get to a log house, those are quite often 2 stories, and you make notches and set beams into those notches. And you would probably notch them in such a way that they would sort of hold those walls together, because as you go up, you don't want that, If you just sat it in a notch and the walls pulled out a little bit, boom, your whole roof would, or your whole floor would fall in. But yeah, you notch these things in as you go up, and then you set your you go up another story, or a lot of them are sort of story and a half, where you'd get all the way up and you're putting on the top plate, and you actually put floors in that section, and you'd get a little bit, a small like attic area.
Okay, back to Super Chat. We've got Shannon Neva, Nutmeg Fund. Thank
Yay!
you so much. John Talley. Oh, I'm sorry. I fritzed. Okay, John Talley. Were all the forests in the 18th century old growth? Are the logs less useful if not old growth?
Actually, I think to a certain extent, it's the opposite.
It's a tricky thing, right?
As we found with the cabin, if your log is too big, you can't handle it. There's nothing you can do with it.
Or too dense.
Right, it's too dense, it's too hard. You really need a kind of a specific tree to build your cabin out of, or else you don't have the ability to move the logs. Even Nolan here, he talks about how he had to invite lots of people over. He couldn't just, I'm going to build a cabin, me and my son, who's, he might have been 12 at the time. No way they could do that by themselves in any length of time. He had to invite lots of neighbors over, and they weren't moving anything bigger than this because it's just too impossible to move.
So the first question though was, were all forests at the time old growth? Like, did you find this new growth stuff?
Well, not necessarily. It's really hard to know what's going on in particular areas, but forests are going to be a lot different in the 18th century. As you get old growth forests, and there are tiny little pockets of old growth forests still, tiny, but the trees are just huge, and there isn't as much undergrowth because they're kind of blocking out all these smaller trees underneath. So it can be nice in one sense. Here he was in bark covered house. It's like, how do we have a cornfield? Well, here's my cornfield. Oh yeah, it's got these giant trees in it, but they're 100 feet apart. So there's a lot of room in between these giant trees. Yeah, I think it's real hit and miss to know exactly how timbered it was, how easy it was to move underneath it, and how easy it was to use these different things.
So Sue, here's your comment. A live pickle is it's fermented like sauerkraut, but uses other veg and water to fill the gaps. No heat is ever applied.
Right. And sauerkraut is exactly that, right? It's fermented. It's just salt. It's just salt, and I guess you'd have to make sure the right thing comes along with it, right? It's like cabbage brings its own ferment bug, for lack of a better term, in to sort of fill in those bacteria gaps.
We need a better term.
I like bug. Yeast, whatever. And so, you got to have that. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not a specialty on that, so I'll stop talking.
Aaron Howitt, again, thank you. In Super Chat, did anyone get seasick making the sailing video? What were 18th century seasickness cures? Well,
I definitely was feeling pretty rough.
A little queasy.
I struggle with headaches.
Yeah.
I always have, and sometimes if they're bad, they kind of make me nauseous. I had one that day on top of that.
Yeah.
And they were cool. They were like, "Hey, here's what you do: stand up here, focus on the horizon," and it actually really helped.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah. First, we had the 3 hour car ride. 3 hour car ride. It's like you're already not feeling great. Hey, let's get out on the ship. Okay.
So my thing about that, I don't have seasickness, but I looked like an orangutan trying to keep my balance on that boat and kind of like flopping around. So
yeah, here he is, like he's juggling this, $3,000 camera. It was fun. It was fun to watch.
We got everything we need.
Yeah. Sarah Phillip on Super Chat. Will you make a video on the celebration of Halloween in the colonies in the 1700s?
I can try, but it's not easy to dig that out. A lot of people ask about that as those kinds of holidays come along, and it's very, very localized in what those traditions are in celebrating those sorts of things. And there are, you gotta kind of pick a spot and see what's happening there and try to find the research for that. That can take a long time to dig those things out. That's the kind of thing that we try to find a person with special knowledge that's already done that research.
All right, so we've got Starklow in Super Chat. John Townsend and daughter? ? Is Ivy interested?
Ivy already works at the store, along with Lauren, my other daughter, and Sydney has worked at the store in the past. What does next generation Townsends look like? Could look like a lot of different things.
Yeah. Wendy Cars in Super Chat. Tip for the tech.
Yeah,
Again? You're spoiling him. Next thing he's going to want paid.
Yeah.
Sarah Joe. I noticed in Philly there are a lot of American sycamore trees. Were there specific significance to planting specific trees in the 17th, 18th century?
Don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not sure exactly where you're going with that, and I'm not sure that they planted, other than fruit trees, that much. Trees just, they do what they do, right? It's like you leave a piece of ground alone, and before you know it, there's a tree growing there.
And certain trees like different environments.
Right.
More.
Sycamores are going to like to grow by the river and all the sorts of things.
We have a lot of sycamores in this area because it used to be swamplands.
Yeah.
So
I love sycamores.
I do too. On that note, we have to say goodbye.
Farewell.
It's just see you later.
This one has gone so fast.
Yeah.
It's always fun to come to the tavern and sit around and chat with you guys and drink drinks. Mine's empty. But it's always energizing. I go into the weekend thinking about different projects and getting ideas from you guys. Special thanks, Ryan, for doing that job back there. Thank you, Aaron, for all that technology stuff. Thank you guys for whether it's Super Chat, whether it's Patreon. We can't make videos without you. Even if you're just hey, I watch those videos and I comment on them, thank you. Thumbs upping those things. Do they still do that? I can't even remember anymore. YouTube keeps changing so much. And there's like no more stars. Anyway, remember that?
Yeah.
Aaron just threw in one more, Aaron Howlett. Time to go start the weekend. Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing our videos and watching them all the time. It's amazing the fan base we've got, and you guys keep us going, keep me energized. The morale is up. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Go ahead, Ryan.
David Beiser says, because I was feeling bad for John. Thank you.
Thanks.